Well, good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us for our February Shotsuki Memorial Service. You get to hear me again because I spoke in January, but at any rate, it's really nice to be able to join all of you for this service. And as Reverend Hasegawa read the names of the people, the members who passed away before us in the month of February, I recognize many of the friends of our temple who were so supportive over the years. See, we gather to honor and remember them, but we must also see the memorial service as a gift that we received from them, an opportunity for us to look back into our past and an important chance to listen to the Buddha's teachings. With the 850th birthday of Shinran Shonin and the 800th anniversary of the founding of the Jodo Shinshu tradition coming up in April, our focus has been on the person that Shinran Shonin, the founder of our tradition, was. And the theme of the celebration, as you know, is Namu Amida Butsu, to discover the meaning of being born as human beings. And I've been talking about the theme for some time now, and with the celebratory services to begin at our mother temple in Kyoto in the latter part of March, it is coming up soon. I'm glad that a good number of our members from our temples in our North America district, including Chicago, that over 40 members will be going to participate in the celebration. At our services and at study classes and seminars, the part of our history in which Shinran Shonin, the person acknowledged to be the founder of our Honganji tradition, was persecuted and exiled to Echigo in the northwest part of Japan, that's now known as Niigata, since the Buddhist tradition, Shin Buddhist tradition, was not in favor with the government and with the established denominations in the Kyoto region. This all happened around the beginning of the 13th century, and Reverend Hasegawa has been serving as a speaker at many seminars to talk about this part of our history. And we learn about why such a thing happened, that Shinran would be, exiled out of Kyoto, and of how tragic the most difficult period of his life is actually served as an inspiration for the rest of his life. The reason why this persecution happened is because the new Buddhist movements that was started by his teacher Honen Shonin, the founder of the Jodoshu tradition, began to become a threat to the established Buddhist denominations because people were signing up, well, not signing up, so to speak, but anyways, to come to listen to those teachers and to participate in those services. And in addition, since it was virtually the first time that Buddhism became accessible to the commoners, which is, this is like happening in the 12th, 13th century. It's quite amazing because Buddhism had been in Japan since around the middle of the 6th century, over 600 years. And so it was, in one sense, an empowerment movement of the oppressed class of people, and therefore seen as a threat to all authority. And as a result, the Nembutsu teaching was banned, four priests were executed, and 7 of the leaders, including Honen and Shinran, were exiled. Well, that helps to destroy the image of Buddhism and Buddhists as maintainers of peace and harmony. But these things happened not only in Buddhism. And in addition to being exiled, Shinran and the others were stripped of their status as priests and given secular names, prohibited from transmitting the Buddha Dharma. Until then, he was a priest and he lived in a monastery for 20 years. But Shinran also lived all of his life up to that time in Kyoto, which was the capital of Japan at the time. And it was kind of like, not only was it the political capital, but it was also the center of culture and of religion. And so he was unprepared for what he was to experience in the desolate area called Echigo in the Niigata area today. And he met and lived together with the farmers and fishermen who were barely able to eke out an existence in the harsh conditions of the area. And so it was really a life of hardship that he experienced for many years. And he came to identify with these people so much, and he was deeply impressed with the ability they showed to accept those trials and tribulations with courage and dignity. But it was an especially difficult period in which many people were dying on an everyday basis of famine, and they say also of, what do you call it, viruses spreading, like, we had the coronavirus here. And he thought to himself, I must do something to help these people because they're suffering so much. And so he took up the traditional passage of reading the sutras, which are the original teachings of the Buddha. And he vowed to read the 3 principal sutras of our tradition 1,000 times. The 3 combined would probably have amounted to over 1,000 pages, written in ancient classical Chinese. And to read it, to read it 1,000 times would be no small feat. But he was committed to doing this in the hopes that such an act would help to relieve the suffering of the people. But then after months of endeavor, he came to the conclusion that this act of just simply reading the sutras will not bring any real relief to the people. And it was an awakening to his inability to do anything that could resolve their plight in life. And he took on the name Shinran, the foolish, bald-headed disciple of the Buddha, Gutoku Shaku Shinran, and began to identify even more with the people and to share their suffering. The lesson was, even though the challenges they faced seemed overwhelming, it was precisely because of the harsh conditions of their lives that made them the principal target, so to speak, of the Buddhist compassion, or in terminology of our tradition, the chief recipients of Amida's compassion. And no matter how difficult life could seem, they could join the ranks of those to whom enlightenment is guaranteed. For most of the people that he lived together with, it was the first time that they were given hope in their lives, were given a new perspective with which to appreciate their lives on an everyday basis. For Shinran, he came to the realization that he didn't have the strength nor the ability to take away the suffering, but that he could commiserate with them and he could share both their happiness and suffering. And the experience was to be invaluable in shaping Shinran's understanding and appreciation of the Buddha Dharma. Years ago, I used the example of a spotlight and a floodlight. And this was an example that was brought up by the very famous Buddhist scholar named Alan Watts. He was a Zen Buddhist, and he was really instrumental in popularizing Zen Buddhism to the populace. And he talked about the spotlight consciousness and the floodlight consciousness, but that today's society, and quite possibly throughout the history of humankind, it encourages us to develop our spotlight consciousness, which is the ego-centered view that everything is okay as long as I'm okay. Everything is okay as long as my family, my circle of friends are okay. And through this experience of living in the harsh conditions of northern Japan, Shinran develops his floodlight consciousness, in which he comes to the realization that his happiness is dependent on everyone else around him also being happy. And so in comparison, I realized that my spotless consciousness is too strong for my floodlight consciousness to come to the floor. And, and we could think about like the pandemic leading up, which was kind of like something that, first was the focus was on spotlight consciousness. In other words, protecting myself, protecting my family and my friends and so forth. And then eventually, leading up to this floodlight consciousness in which we see the suffering of so many others and how we can commiserate with or even support, other people. That floodlight consciousness, which is our care and concern for others, stays hidden unless we have similar experiences of personal suffering, as in the example of Shinran Shonin, or, when we think about it, the people who are suffering in, difficult parts of the world, throughout the world. Also, the tragedies that we have had here recently in Monterey Park, and then also up in Half Moon Bay, and then also individuals like Tyree Nichols and so forth. Some victims, many victims actually of violence. And one of the most respected teachers in our denomination, the Reverend Takashi Hirose, who has since passed away, once talked about his own tragic experiences during World War II. And he was a soldier in the Imperial Army of Japan and was captured and placed in a prisoner's camp in Siberia. He was lucky to survive, and he was able eventually to return to Japan. But upon returning, he found out that family members were killed because of the war, and that his older brother had lost his life as a soldier. And he was expected to carry on the family tradition because his older brother had died. And so he took on the obligation of marrying his brother's wife. And that indelible tragedy was to form who he became. That experience made him a person to whom Buddhism was essential for his well-being. It made him into the great respected teacher that he became. And in contrast, I would say, when I compare my life to someone like Reverend, Reverend Hirose, that I realize that my life has been so pain-free, too easy for the most part, and things, generally speaking, have gone my way. And so, in contrast, it may be that I don't feel the need for Buddhism. I certainly can see how I and the world could benefit from it. But until I come to the same awakening as Shinran, who once said, when I ponder on the compassionate vow of Amida, established through 5 kalpas of profound thought, it was for myself, Shinran, alone. And because I am a being burdened so heavily with karma, I feel even more grateful to the primal vow, which is decisively made to save me. And, this is an insight which, upon first reading, I think it seems to be reflecting an arrogant view. This teaching is for me, and by extension, therefore, for no one else. And likewise, I think we all need to come to the same realization. As long as we feel that it's my kids, my grandkids, my wife, the people out there who are in need of the Buddha Dharma, and not me, not us, then we will continue to be far removed from the lifestyle encouraged in us or to us through Buddhism. So may we all come to develop our floodlight consciousness and live every day becoming persons who the Buddha and all of our ancestors we honor here today wish we become. And I guess I didn't really talk that much about the floodlight and the the floodlight consciousness as opposed to the spotlight consciousness. And basically, as you can imagine, the spotlight consciousness that we normally have is always kind of like focused on myself, on my family, on my friends here at the temple and so forth, and not really extending out to the people that I don't know or that I don't see, and, on a regular basis. And so that floodlight consciousness is to broaden our view and to make sure that we're doing the best we can, not only to be self-centered and thinking just about ourselves or our friends and so forth, but to be able to expand that that view and outlook and compassion to all people that we live together with, and not even only people, but all living things that we live together with. I think that this simple example shows us how strong our spotlight consciousness is and how really difficult it is to share, to truly share another's happiness and another's sorrow. Well, I'd like to thank you all for joining us for our February Shotsuki service, and thank you for listening.